Ever since the arcade days, the racing genre has been a firm staple of video game culture, reveling in the simple pleasure of driving cars to go fast and win competitions. It's a tried and true formula. From pole position to Gran Turismo and Mario Kart to Ridge Racer, there has been no shortage of recognizable heavy hitters, all providing their own unique spin on burning rubber. The immense variety on display means that one title is sure to be your own personal favorite that resonates a little extra with you. Maybe it's MotorTune Grand Prix. That's a neat one. But for us, one game in particular shines ever brighter with each passing year, boldly sticking out from the rest through its fascinating premise and striking presentation. An undying masterpiece that somehow has remained relevant to this very day. The 1986 Sega classic, OutRun.
In OutRun, you participate in a long-distance street race by driving a nondescript red sports car along traffic highways. Instead of other contestants, the main opposition are the regular cars in traffic, as they provide dynamic obstruction to your regular curve handling. Before each checkpoint, the road splits in two, giving the player an active choice of where to go next, meaning that the track will diversify as it branches out further, until the player hits one of 5 destinations. It's a simple yet intriguing concept that self-evidently invites for subsequent revisits, perhaps for no other reason than to continue exploring the road. And it proved effective, as the game became an instant success and one of the most recognizable and beloved entries in its genre, making it a flagship entry in Sega's catalog and helping to define the legacy of internal development studio AM2.
A certified classic, if you will. Coincidentally, the best game ever made. Now, despite its acclaim, you may be surprised to learn that OutRun wasn't particularly unique for its time, at least not structurally. Already in 1981, the similarly Sega-published Turbo focused on driving along highways and dodging passing traffic, while the luxurious TX1 from 1983 introduced the idea of diverging paths. Likewise, 1 year prior to OutRun, AM2 made a motorcycle endurance racer Hang On, a game that is such an obvious direct predecessor that perhaps OutRun should best be described as Hang On with cars. This is not to say that OutRun is somehow a bad formulaic game lacking imagination and vision. Absolutely not, far from. But it does exemplify how its many peculiarities have only grown more distinct in the rearview mirror. Today's racing games prioritize lap races, fierce competition and extensive car rosters, all aspects that OutRun with its contemporaneous arcade design boldly defies, making it come across as somewhat relaxed and minimalistic. Evidently, there must have been something more to OutRun than its solitude and non-specific tracks that made it stand out from the rest. Truth of the matter is that we don't ever think about Turbo, we don't care about TX1, maybe we've heard about Hang On, but OutRun, we remember OutRun, even as it too was outrun by time and made obsolete by other games that no one can recall. It remained in our collective consciousness. We didn't let go of it, we hung on, if you will. And I would harbor a guess that what made OutRun so timeless was not just the sum of its parts, but more so, its evocative presentation. OutRun is iconic, and by that I don't just mean by sheer impact. Rather, OutRun clearly attempts to use iconography to convey a certain idea. In a move that still boldly defies genre norms, you are given no choice of either your vehicle or avatar, instead forced to inhabit a surprisingly specific role. In OutRun, we play as a man and his female companion in a strikingly red sports car, supposedly legally distinct from a Ferrari Testarossa. At all moments of playing the game, the complete picture of this dynamic is burned on the screen. Because we are them, their trip is ours, as are their triumphs and failures. Typically, any kind of interest the racing genre harbors for our avatars is preoccupied with personal choice. Whether it be Mario or a familiar manufacturing brand, if we're gonna be anything or anyone, we'd best choose for ourselves. Seldom are we given no options at all, and if we aren't, our mandated vessels are rarely this vibrant. Through these means, it doesn't feel far-fetched to argue that OutRun is defined by its peculiar protagonists. Distilled in them is an entire narrative, a story that blossoms through our very actions. It's surprisingly evocative for being such a simple visual, but I suppose that's exactly why. It's direct, unashamedly blatant about nothing but a core idea. In fact, the way we are given no words to contextualize what is happening allows OutRun to become a game we actively have to interpret and make sense of ourselves. Who are these people? What can we surmise from them? What do we see in them? Or, conversely, what are we expected to see in them? Considering the players sit down in the driver's seat, quite literally so in the arcade, I suppose we are in some sense meant to project ourselves onto OutRun. At least if we imagine ourselves being the assumed average target demographic in 1986, which would be some pasty guy in sunglasses. OutRun is a game by boys, for boys, so it adheres to that sort of power fantasy. A knockoff Ferrari, a desirable girl, beautiful summer skies, the open road and excitement abound. It's everything you ever wanted. The heteronormative ideal. Or so I've heard. I won't condemn OutRun for presuming so much about its audience though. I mean, at the time they were probably statistically correct. In fact, all of our representation needs were answered anyway in the 1993 follow-up, Outrunners, which provides a wide roster of colorful characters and relationship dynamics. And considering the innate sexual tension that's always present at OutRun's core, I willfully choose to interpret these duos as lesbian and gay couples. Good stuff. Thanks for being the only game company that matters, Sega. With that in mind, I can't help but admire the unwavering firmness in OutRun's vision. It's intriguingly specific, because I also strongly believe that it aims to impress upon us a vague idea, instead of focusing wholeheartedly on the racing, as one might expect. Take that lack of avatar options, for example, and how it juxtaposes with the one selection screen that is actually present in the game, the radio knob. OutRun forces an archetype onto us and asks us only to pick the sunshine melodies accompanying it. The bouncy fun of magical sound shower. The relaxingly peaceful passing breeze. Or the cool and confident splash wave. We're not choosing the conditions of our driving, we're picking a vibe. With this, OutRun truly feels like one of the first games to fully and consciously transcend its genre by using it as a vessel to express something else. Something more. OutRun encapsulates a real experience one might have while driving a car in real life, or at least a daydream of what that might be like. In OutRun, summer is in full swing. People excitedly see you off as you depart, onto the open road and onwards towards an unknown destination. It is appealing and romantic, a moment filled with motion and optimism, the open embrace of freedom. Granted, there is a specific end in OutRun. 5 of them, in fact. Just as your play session begins at the flag-waving starting point, it will eventually end at the finish line. OutRun is beholden to its rules after all. It still carries the pretense of a race through its bookends and demanding checkpoints. To reach the goal, you must master its sharp curves and the precise handling of the car. At the end of the day, the machine must quickly throw you off the ride so the coins can keep coming. So, yes, the couple may technically be part of a literal race where they're aiming for an actual goal. However, the presentation and open-ended structure suggest a certain looseness. The forks in the road deliberately discard the race for a moment and asks you to explore by deciding where to go next. We're not pushing milliseconds and mastering the only path through Ridge City here. Whatever track this ends up becoming is one that you tailor-made yourself. Through the simplest of means, OutRun successfully convinces us of the unpredictable nature of driving along a highway rather than tailing ourselves within a circular track. We have no idea what's around the corner if we don't go there and check it out ourselves. Our curiosity takes center stage.
In that sense, OutRun is more sightseeing than a competition, a road trip rather than a race. The presence of a timer and goalpost merely make up the boundaries within which we express ourselves. Whatever excitement the end may bring cannot compare to the euphoria of choosing another path to continue our journey. That is, if you can even reach the goal. God damn it! It's quite a difficult game after all. Unless you're a bona fide pro gamer, your play session will most likely end with time running out, making the goal, like stated, more of a hypothetical, a hard cutoff point to stop you from hogging up the arcade cabinet forever. In practice, OutRun becomes more of an endurance test, seeing how far you can go, with each new diversion a reward unto itself. That is at least a glowing impression left in my mind after so many hours of playing the game throughout the years. I mean, in some sense, the notion there even being a goal in OutRun feels borderline obscene. Like, who are we to tell these guys it's time to pack it up and go home? They only just got started. Truthfully, the romantic pursuit of freedom on the open road should end with running out of gas, not a parking lot. It should be our insufficient prowess that hinders the endless journey, not an arbitrary line. When we play OutRun, the fantasy we partake in isn't about the goal, it's about the road. That's what we want, and it's always there. When we start, we converge into the flowing traffic, and when we win, we take an exit away from the continuing highway. The road stretches out beyond our view, further away than we could ever reach. OutRun may end, but the sheer concept of the road is larger than what OutRun can contain. It is boundless and never-ending. With this in mind, the obvious wrinkles in OutRun's exterior become beneficial and meaningful. In 1986, the dynamic winding road was conveyed through little more than a complicated series of lights and mirrors, straining itself to present a sort of spatiality which has since been declared utter child's play. Yet, the strong aesthetic direction helps mitigate the feeling of this techno-trickery being hopelessly dated. Instead, it continues spurring our imagination. Unfazed, OutRun effortlessly remains relevant and overcomes time itself, transcending its technical limitations to create a vision that could only truly work in this form. As central as the starring couple is the ever-present horizon, conveyed through the FAW 3D as a flat postcard vista, always tauntingly receding from you, impossible to reach. We easily get the impression that beyond the rational aim for the finish line, our brilliant red car is actually striving further beyond that, towards the places that always remain on screen as little more than a suggestion. This idea is strengthened when we compare to something like the later sequel OutRun 2, which would present its locales in the magnificent splendor of tangible 3D, giving us lucid looks at the sights we pass by. Yet, despite that, I can't help but prefer how the limitations made that original horizon poetically distant and undefined. In playing OutRun, we accept the illusion that these places inhabit the same space as our avatar. However, rationally we understand that the car cannot ever arrive inside of the idyllic snapshot. It can only feebly attempt an approach and then bypass it. Not for lack of trying though. In perfect harmony with OutRun's romanticism, the horizon is inherently unattainable. We are aiming for places that are to be seen but never touched, phantoms that come to life only in our imagination. In other words, it is our firm impression that the couple in OutRun are not actually going anywhere, just going, beginning their journey. OutRun is the start of a trip that is only continued in our dreams. And why not? Isn't that a fantasy we humor every time we find ourselves on the outset of a trip to faraway places? When else do we explore the unknown extent of the highway than when we travel outside of our daily lives? In its summer splendor, OutRun embodies the excited opening of a road trip, those magical moments where the pure sensation of escaping mundanity and starting something refreshingly new fills us with exhilaration, long before the boredom sets in, when we get stuck in traffic, our legs tire, we can't agree where to stop for lunch, the pressing urge to pee emerges, and the completely wrong person gets the AUX. OutRun precedes the disappointing reality and instead captures that brief golden window where the journey exists untampered and perfect in your anticipation before time is able to steal it from you. It's a distillation of only the good parts. We get to pick the music, we have the intimate closeness to those we love, and as we speed off into the distance, we are allowed nothing but the most spectacular sights. It's the utter beauty of being in motion. When we speed down the highway, we pass by all of these locations we could potentially occupy, but only faintly do with our eyes before they're gone, replaced by something else. Everything is real, it is truly there, but we don't stop and touch it. Instead, we rearrange our view into a spectacular collage of perception. In this process, we inhabit an endless amount of places all at once, feeling like the only home we have is the world and that our essence is pervasive rather than stagnant. I am unshackled. I am everywhere. I am free. This is why I prefer a room with a view, because the more I see, the more I own as a part of myself. Only by being in motion can we transcend ourselves and become one with everything.
Maybe OutRun wasn't fully intended to be that grandiose, but it absolutely works as a substitute. Its presentation is as romantic and liberating as it is wish fulfillment, both of our lofty idealized ambitions, but likewise our earthly desires. So as much as we are tantalized by the escapism on show, it equally tempts us with power and status. When playing OutRun, we may experience its carefree atmosphere, but within that, a veritable seed of arrogance is born. Because while OutRun may be about no road in particular, it is absolutely about one car in particular. One which, on the one hand, lends us a vessel of self-projection for the escapism, but on the other, expectations and stark reminders. The characteristically red sports car, the Ferrari, is famously a luxury vanity object, made to entice, impress, perhaps compensate, and show off. How the young couple got a hold of one is never important. Perhaps they are rich assholes, perhaps they hijacked it and are currently on the run from the cops, or perhaps it is merely an unexplained framework to present an exaggerated, unrealistic scenario.
It's probably that one.
What is important is that OutRun in some way or another suggests its featured vehicle as the one key to experiencing its beautifully painted splendor. Maybe if you had a nice car, girls would like you and you'd have the means to just go far away. Maybe then you could escape reality and shed the burden of yourself. I suppose there is a subtle malicious streak resting within OutRun that tauntingly prods at our self-worth. In humoring its ideas, do we not in some way also admit that what it presents is something we cannot have? Whether conscious or not, I at least notice this behavior in myself while playing. That I fall too hard into the power fantasy and indulge with it too far. I want OutRun to be leisurely and perfect. I want it to be cranked up to the max. mindless and vindicating. I want to see everything. I want to go as fast as possible, and I don't want anything to stop me. So I play with fire, alter the settings in one of those newer M2 ports so I can barter with time for more seconds on the clock. Also, I can trivialize OutRun's initial trials of resourceful acceleration and track memorization into becoming a breezy cruise. The once disastrous crashes are now little more than light hiccups, and the easy-hard dichotomy in the road branches mere suggestions. I entitle myself to the finish line because losing is a mood killer. And so, OutRun is robbed of its identity and transformed into a game that is about the goal instead of the journey. And even when I take on the challenge of playing at the original arcade settings, I still find myself hopelessly craving a good time, desperately holding on to the gas pedal so I can veer off the road and meet my early demise. I crash and burn, and then I crash once more. Every time it is because I lean too hard into the acceleration of going as fast as I can that there simply is no hope of taking those sharp turns. Until time finally runs out and I am left dissatisfied at my own inadequacy. Arrogance is my undoing. I expect OutRun to give me everything it has to offer and then some, to entertain me with its power trip. I may believe I aspire for the goal and a high score, but at the end of the day, I think the desire to indulge in OutRun's aesthetics is stronger. I adore and admire OutRun. I think it's a phenomenal game, but at the same time, it demands that I contend with what it realistically is beneath the surface. As I learn its intricacies and master the routes so I can slowly but humbly edge ever further, I find myself focusing more on the timer, anticipating the same old curves and comparing my results. The more I play, the more distant I grow from its idealistic vision. I find that the OutRun I play in my head every time I hear its name is different from the OutRun I end up playing when I actually sit down with it. I feel alienated, confused if OutRun intends its presented power fantasy as the baseline or the reward for skilled players. What am I looking for? Why do I strive for more when everything I need is right here anyway? As summer repeats once more and I go down the same old road, something calls out to me that nothing has changed but me. That in chaining myself to this unstoppable Ferrari, I have ironically become stuck in time, unable to move forward.
In June 1986, just 3 months before the original arcade release of OutRun, the John Hughes-directed teen comedy Ferris Bueller's Day Off premiered in theaters. In it, we follow the adventures of the suave cool kid Ferris Bueller, played by Matthew Broderick, as he feigns sickness to steal himself a one-day vacation and partake in the finer pleasures of life with his best friends Sloane Peterson and Cameron Fry, played by Mia Sara and Alan Rock respectively. With its mixture of light-hearted comedy and observations on life, the film has come to be regarded as a classic in its genre, perhaps the finest in Hughes' filmography. It is also, coincidentally, the best film ever made. While Ferris Bueller's Day Off and OutRun have no tangible connection to each other, these two works are nevertheless contemporaneously linked, capturing the mid-80s zeitgeist in their own ways. Both exude a glowing bright optimism, romanticize the concepts of leisure and freedom, feature young characters in driving roles, but primarily, both stories center around a Ferrari. Through examining OutRun the game and Ferris Bueller's Day Off the movie in conjunction, we may reveal new and novel connections in the ways they relate to their featured car brand, enriching our understanding of them by the emboldening of certain core ideas in the process. Much like OutRun's ever-present forward momentum, Ferris Bueller's Day Off clearly believes that leisure is not spent lazily at home, but out there in the big world. After having established his sickness alibi at the beginning of the film, Ferris immediately enacts plans to make his way from the quiet fictional suburb Shermer to the bustling of downtown Chicago. Lacking any means of transportation, it falls to his friend Cameron to reluctantly present him with a solution, in particular, the beckoning allure of his dad's antique car collection. The crown jewel, the 1961 Ferrari 250 GT California, an old pristine ride that is unimaginably expensive and nauseatingly rare. Despite Cameron's protest that he instead use his piece of shit, as it were, Ferris's mind is already made up. This is the only ride he can use to cosplay as his girlfriend's dad and pick her up from school, and likewise the only vessel worthy of taking him to the places they need to be. For Ferris, there is no alternative that can reaffirm his dignity. There is no option but the Ferrari, which as a result becomes the most important piece of his day plan, since it provides the means for the gang to convene and go wherever they want.
If you had access to a car like this, would you take it back right away? Neither would I.
In this way, the film quickly establishes a meaningful link between Ferris and the Ferrari. As the protagonist and driving force of the plot, the powerful elegance of the vehicle extends his presence into a practical object for the drama. Sure, the real owner of the car may be Cameron's dad, but he is never seen by the audience. Rather, it is Ferris who eagerly yearns to ride it and jumps into the driver's seat without hesitation, exerting a more symbolic ownership of it. He gives it a face and in turn it extends his agency. They were essentially made for each other. Just look at this somewhat unusual name, Ferris. While it was possibly inspired by amusement connotations in the Ferris wheel, originally designed by George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. for the 1893 Chicago World Fair, which would establish a geographical connection, the name Ferris likewise reverberates Ferrari. The choice feels deliberate, and regardless if it actually was or not, the comparison still begs to be made. In a film that liberally mixes the fantastical and mundane, Ferris and the Ferrari become vessels for the heightened reality at display. They are seemingly grounded entities that are nevertheless out of the ordinary and vaguely implausible. As the main character, Ferris is an embodiment of youthful desires and ideals. A far cry from the vulnerable and nuanced cast in the John Hughes sister film The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller comes off more as a vessel for teenagers to self-project upon, rather than someone we could satisfyingly identify as ourselves. Ferris is cool, clever, well-spoken and confident. He has a solution for anything and the endorsement of everyone. His complicated and impractical plans somehow always sort themselves out, leading to the full confidence of the people around him, whether it be tricking his parents that he's sick or how the entire school comically rallies for his speedy recovery. In one of the pivotal scenes, he hijacks a parade float and spontaneously ushers all of Chicago into a choreographed song and dance to Twist and Shout. Never mind that he's publicly miming to a cover, everyone loves him like a national hero regardless. They think he's a righteous dude. As his sister Jeannie laments, everything always works out for him, and seemingly this divine privilege has lived with Ferris for so long that he has come to expect it, coldly relying on it to sort out all his troubles. In other words, Ferris Bueller is a human cartoon character with an intimate relationship to the fourth wall, a mildly terrifying presence who unwittingly bends reality according to his will. Throughout the film, we keep reaffirming this impression of Ferris as an utterly unreal entity, as he self-consciously employs the conventions of cinema to scene transition speedrun his way to the next location, gain insight on what's going on elsewhere, and swiftly get out of trouble. Bending time itself, Ferris manages to somehow fit my entire week-long vacation to Chicago within half a day. His resourcefulness tells of everything we want in ourselves, to be as confident and careless while tirelessly making the most of every moment.
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Ferris Bueller asserts profound weight to his day off, in a manner one would best live each day like it's their last. Without worry for tomorrow, all consequences disperse and we're forced to focus on what we truly care about. For Ferris, it's his love, best friend, and a bucket list of entertainment. In the process of defining his entire life in a day, Ferris inadvertently colors every other character in the story. His parents diligently keep on working, oblivious to their son's antics. His sister petly throws herself at narking instead of minding her own business. This registered sex offender ruins himself in the pursuit of busting Ferris. His girlfriend Sloane leisurely tags along on the adventure he provides. But most importantly, Cameron is revealed as stuck in a rut, unable to embrace joy and live for himself. However, within that space he is given the chance to overcome his demons and reach a grander sense of fulfillment. Sure, while Ferris may provide us with the fun and excitement we may seek in a film of this disposition, the true heart that resonates with viewers is found in the story of Cameron, this pitiful, regular person begrudgingly stuck in a wacky teen comedy and forced to make do.
Really, he is the complete opposite of his more upbeat, light-hearted counterparts, which creates some interesting contrasts. Whereas Ferris pulls off his whole malingering act and Sloane needs the stage death of her grandmother, Cameron truly believes he's sick. We meet him at home, fading away in his bed, feeling like crap and denying Ferris's offers. Taken by depression and a mind full of worry, Cameron is unwilling to do much of anything, so he remains immobile until Ferris's unending pestering gets him to relent, reluctantly and frustratingly. And regardless of all the places Ferris takes Cameron to, despite finding brief respite, his endless worry simply will not subside, cropping up again and again without fail. Unable to fully partake in the pleasures of life, he finds himself helplessly sitting at the side of the world, merely observing. In one of the film's most striking key sequences, we see the gang visit the Art Institute of Chicago to marvel at their impressive collection in a montage of poses and observation. Eventually, Cameron stops in front of Georges Seurat's neo-impressionist masterpiece, A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte. With a transfixed stare back at its central child, he seemingly identifies a connection through their shared immobility in a world of leisure. As the instrumental rendition of the Smiths' classic Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want draws to a close, and the camera mercilessly keeps zooming until they both disperse in pointillistic fragments, the message could not be clearer. Cameron is not where he wants or needs to be, unable to help himself. Perhaps somewhat shockingly, he has suddenly understood a greater truth about his own life. In keeping with teen film casting tradition, actor Alan Ruck was 29 years old when he played a 17-year-old Cameron. His vaguely youthful looks work to sell us the illusion, but likewise, the idea that Cameron seems a lot older than he is imbues the character with more depth. Because there is very little to convince us that Cameron is a teenager apart from presumption. His father is who knows where, and his role as a high school student is merely implied. The great lengths Ferris and Sloane go through to win their liberty are contrasted with how Cameron just kinda gets up and walks outside. In a world that frames him as a regular adult, Cameron's teenage years come across more like a mental state that will not disperse, a self-assumption not corroborated by reality. The suggestion feels relatable and honest for a film admittedly made by a bunch of grown-ups, that as we age, our impressions of ourselves may become displaced, making us feel younger than we actually are, until one day you find yourself a decade later surprised by the seamless passage of time. It turns out that as you were supposed to be let out into the world, nothing happened. Somehow, Life ended at graduation with a vague haze of meandering, and now you are so old. In accordance with Ferris's book-ended message, life moves pretty fast, and evidently, Cameron has not stopped to smell the roses. The contrast between the impossibly larger-than-life Ferris and the painfully ordinary Cameron is palpable. They seem mismatched, like characters from different films who wouldn't get along as they have nothing in common. But in practice, that difference between them conveys a striking point. They make a great pair. One is the aspirational incarnation of a teenager, and the other our plausible reality. Cameron may be dragged along for the ride, but he, like us, is also undeniably living vicariously through Ferris. I'm not saying this as some TV tropes level conspiracy theory that Ferris Bueller is Cameron's hallucinated perfect alter ego, but rather that the film paints ideas through the cinema screen, by emphasizing that contrast to better incline us to make the comparison. Ferris may be the main character, the namesake, the driving force of the plot, but Cameron, he is the emotional core, the character arc, the relatable audience stand-in. In a reversal of Ferris's clearly defined home life, Cameron has a disjointed presence in his unconventional modernist house with a family that is only ever inferred. The Ferrari is his father's most prized possession, a pristine museum object, which he loves more than his wife and son. When stolen by Ferris, this car becomes the sole catch to Cameron's day out, a potent reminder of his father's inevitable wrath, and a symbol for all his worry and anxiety. But it likewise acts as an extension of Ferris, the means to enable his extravagant lifestyle, his full realization. If Ferris and Sloane are the carefree perfect couple driving the Ferrari, Cameron is the awkward third wheel, the invisible backseat passenger. And in this way, he's not unlike us, as much an observer as the audience. He partakes in the grand day by figuratively holding Ferris's leading hand throughout it, but he has no real say, no agency. All of this is for him. Ferris admits as much, but he cannot accept it, cannot take it. If the great difference between them spells out Ferris as the unreal expectations Cameron holds himself to, then the stagnant Ferrari is potent as the dormant inability to act upon and realize these dreams. Kept in the glass prison of Cameron's soul, it stands for that perfect vision of youthful eccentricity, status and power that we cannot ever hope to capture or reclaim. Even if we project it upon Cameron's father, the idea doesn't falter. The 1961 Ferrari 250 GT California is a relic of a past time, priceless and irreplaceable. The impossible corporeal avatar of action and movement. On the highway of life, Cameron is tragically and ironically chained to a perfect car parked inside a garage. A vehicle too precious to ever be driven, one that must be maintained and polished under the veneer that it has never been used, that nothing has been able to break the illusion of eternal youth. So when Cameron is then given the golden ticket to experiencing the joyful splendors of life within a day, he discovers to his dismay that the mileage has shockingly accumulated, the fantasy broken by the relentlessness of reality. And as much as he tries to drive in reverse, the miles simply won't come off. There is no way to turn back time.
As a stereotypical luxury car brand, it seems that Ferrari imbues us with expectations of its unaltered nature. Such costly commodities must be kept clean and pristine so as to not break their value. To own one is a display of wealth, to use it even more so. truthfully, what hope does a regular person like you or me have of ever realistically owning and driving a Ferrari? Do not fucking interact if you own a Ferrari. This channel is not for you. Far from a mundane vessel connecting its owner to some desk job, the brilliant red sports car is thus an object of sporadic leisure cruises, one for special occasions, the automobile equivalent of formal attire. The lingering impression becomes that of a perfect fantasy car, never humbled by dirt and wear, because no sensible owner would allow it. A relic immune to stagnation and unfazed by the march of time. In OutRun, the Ferrari is driven by a young couple, reflecting an appeal to boyish desires for such commodities. Likewise, Ferris janks the Ferrari because he too desires it. He wants to use it and parade it as an extension of himself, the mark of success, signifier of his ego. Both OutRun and Ferris Bueller's Day Off seem to equate the pristineness of a Ferrari with energetic youth, inherently linked as some natural state of being. We might even fall for the tantalizing conclusion that one will beget the other, that we too could be as realized if only we had one. Maybe that would be our second chance to do it right, to live the idealized life we squandered. But just as we cannot reverse the wear on a car, we are unable to restore our youth.
It's like that car. He loves the car. He hates his wife.
There is a tragic cautionary tale found in Cameron's unseen father. This middle-aged man who has finally been able to buy the car of his dreams, a then 25-year-old vessel presumably representative of his youth, the last few years before the birth of his son. And despite placing so much self-worth and affection into the Ferrari that it outshines the love for his family, he refuses to use it, opting to instead obsess over its frozen state. So tragic a fall is this that within the drama of the film he is reduced to the car itself, representing nothing more than the tension between him and his son. Essentially, Mr. Fry has, in this way, objectified himself to a near comedic level. There is no present for him, only the destructive, futile effort to recapture the past. A dead end in life where the only thing left is aimless stagnation in pining for the impossible. The irony is that in just one day, Ferris Bueller is able to effortlessly find utility in the car and use it better than Cameron's father ever could. Because in all his impossible, romanticized carefreeness, he is immune to consequences, unconcerned about the dizzying monetary value and second-hand market prospects. What is mileage to one who lives in a day? What is wear and tear to the demon of youth? What is tomorrow when all that exists is today? Just as we have no hope of ever owning a Ferrari, we have just as little hope in driving it like Ferris Bueller would. Because we may strive for perfection, but we cannot ever achieve it. We may imagine ourselves worryless, but reality always weighs upon us. We may fancy ourselves younger, but we are always aging.
In 2003, Sega did unexpected and brought back their iconic racing franchise for another spin, in OutRun 2, a game that aims to recapture everything that made the original so beloved for a new generation. And they certainly succeeded. It's a great game, arguably better than the original. It has more sophisticated mechanics, extra game modes, an actual Ferrari license, and is fully rendered in 3 dimensions to make the driving more comprehensible and grant the Vista's real volume. Yet, beyond these fancy new features, OutRun 2 still proudly relies on familiarity. You still take off on a sunny beach in a shiny red Ferrari, with a girl in the passenger seat who wants to go far away, cruise along trafficked highways and follow the forks in the road towards 5 end destinations. It is still OutRun, as it was, as it would be today, just as we remember it, unchanged. Putting firm emphasis on its titular 2, the game actively encourages comparisons to a long-forgotten past. Look how far we've come, it eagerly proclaims, while at the same time assuring us that nothing has in fact changed. It's just an update, an elaborate paint job to modernize something outdated, make it feel as new as it once was through the novelty of its unchanged nature. OutRun 2 is a game about nostalgia, one that allows us to relive an old memory and inhabit its world anew. However, in this blatant juxtaposition of past and future, drenched in travel romanticism and the idealized vehicular experience, a borderline perverted idea rears its head. Despite the passing of nearly 20 years, the car is still pristine and the couple still young and beautiful, carrying on with the same activities like nothing, unfazed by the weight of reality. Are they the same people or replaced by a new generation? Maybe the game is canonically set in 1986, or perhaps the original OutRun is retroactively set in 2003. What if they're vampires? Whatever explanation you accept, it's evident that OutRun needs to be presented in this way to sell its identity, convince you of the illusion. Because in OutRun, the road is perpetual and the horizon always calling. In OutRun, summer never ends. With its insistent whispering of, "Do you remember?" it's clear that the game uncompromisingly targets an adult audience. One that presumably played OutRun when it was hot and new. People who understand its cultural impact and why releasing a sequel decades later would be noteworthy. Yet, in its unchanged state, it brings back that same wish fulfillment as before, and in the process reaffirms a point by drastically upping their stakes. We transcend the quaint desires in having a nice car, a girlfriend and freedom. Now we're staring at an immortalized view of the past and are asked to identify with it. What if you hadn't changed? What if you could have stayed young forever? What if you could go back and do it right? But we can't. Of course not. We couldn't back then and we still can't today. Life will not just hand you a Ferrari. You're not automatically entitled to affection, and leisure has its limits. We cannot turn back time, cannot reduce the mileage, cannot retake our lost years. We don't intend to say OutRun is malicious for expressing or implying these thoughts, or that its worldview is hopelessly naive. Just that our cultural fixation on the glorification of youth reaches weird points in the long run, when the only ones who can engage with it are real human beings who change and age. We can use these forms of media as a vessel to feel younger, to reminisce on the past. Maybe show it to the next generation so they too can appreciate it. I mean, evidently that's how we got into OutRun. We weren't even born when it came out. We are just one step in its perpetual line of audiences. Sooner or later, all its young, wide-eyed players will become old, while OutRun remains as unchanged as it always was. What hope do we have of keeping up with its expectations? The deck was stacked against us to begin with. With time, the game has perhaps inadvertently recontextualized the unchanged nature of its classic and simplistic formula into some form of bizarre perpetuity. With the veneer of a pristine vintage Ferrari, OutRun repeats the same scenario again and again to convince us of its perfectly preserved essence. But who is this for? While OutRun keeps growing increasingly niche and quaint in an ever-evolving video game landscape, its Dorian Gray passengers remain unaltered. For each passing year we play, we allow its spotless exterior to further deteriorate us with endless comparisons, while its potential audience shrinks and the reflection becomes ever more untrue and dishonest. It becomes harder and harder to find ourselves within its portrayed world, because it cannot be for anyone.
Rather, as OutRun was and as OutRun still is, it can only appeal to what we wish we were, and unless we reject that notion, we can only remain miserable in its shadow. At the tail end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, as Cameron has discovered that the miles won't come off his father's Ferrari, he surprisingly opts to leave it as is. In his distraught state over the consequences, he has found clarity and revelation. Instead of hiding his actions, he would rather prefer to stand up for himself and not hide anymore. But with this wake-up comes the release of all his frustrations, as Cameron truly realizes how he has been denied the love of his father in the shadow of this car. In anger, he repeatedly kicks the Ferrari and gives it a serious dent, irrevocable damage that will no doubt cause his father to respond in tenfold. But Cameron isn't afraid. He's just glad that his options are solidified. No more running. Within the text, it's clear that this scene is about Cameron taking a stand against his father. Having shed his iconic Ferrari red hockey jersey, Cameron is rid of the burden and free to make his voice heard. However, within the film's framework, there is greater meaning to be found, because, as is common when in the company of Ferris Bueller, things escalate drastically. Unwittingly, Cameron pushes the propped-up reversing Ferrari down to the ground again, making it careen uncontrollably and propel itself out the glass walls of the house into the pit below. No longer a mere scratch, the Ferrari is toasted, completely busted, the damage catastrophically immeasurable. But Cameron is still unfazed, because now he's unshackled, free of everything weighing him down. The symbol of power, perfection, and eternal youth is gone, undone. No longer does his polar opposite alter ego have a vessel to enact his plans. No longer must he compare himself to unattainable ideals. No longer can the past weigh him down. It is at this point that Cameron and Ferris part ways. Despite Ferris offering to take the blame, Cameron insists. He doesn't need Ferris Bueller anymore. He can handle himself. He is good as he is and can take on life's hardships on his own. And as Ferris later assures Sloane,
Yeah, sure, for the first time in his life. He's gonna be just fine.
in defiance against everything the Ferrari represents, against the sort of person comparisons with Ferris would expect him to be, Cameron has finally learned to stand up for himself, face maturity, and take real control of his life. And at some point, I suppose we must too. Just like Cameron, we must confront all of those expectations that are projected upon us and oppose them. Realize that it's holding us back, so we can stop running. We can enjoy freedom, leisure, travel, and the summer skies without comparing ourselves to a projected identity that has been pre-packaged for us, without putting all of our self-worth into the properties of an expensive car. We can't keep playing OutRun and uncritically accept it as sensible. It will do us no good. Eventually, we must take the bull by its horns, stare it in the eyes, and firmly declare, "This is not me." OutRun is a fictionalized encapsulation of bliss, the romanticized promise of endless possibilities, a world where the horizon never arrives. It's a perpetually stretched out snapshot of anticipation, what we wish we could have but never will be able to attain. We just need to be careful of its allure, so we don't fall into comparisons by beholding ourselves to its impossible ideals. Because nobody can inhabit this sort of identity. It's not real. It can't be. It's an arcade game from the mid-80s about a fantastical situation, a beautiful installation of digital sunshine. We must distance ourselves from OutRun so as to not mistake it as aspirational, reclaim it on our own terms. Only then can we truly appreciate what it has to offer. Because, of course, It's just simple entertainment. Like how Ferris arranges his day for Cameron's sake, so is OutRun a gift for us. A reaffirming escape from reality where we can indulge in its carefree worldview. A day off whenever we want it. Our lifetime ticket to see the clear summer skies, hear the faint crashing of the waves, and feel that cool passing breeze.
Congratulations for making it to the end of the video. We don't really know how well a video about OutRun is gonna do, so if you like this or heck any of our other videos, please do share it around with your friends. Gush about it, make loud noises about transparency. That's the best way to help us grow and reach a wider audience. You can also, of course, like, comment and subscribe if you dig our vibe. And if you're an especially cool cat, you might even consider supporting us at patreon.com/transparens.
Yes, just like these lovely scrungles have done. Acid Shark, All Purpose Nobody, Athayet, Ben Clark, Beaver the Bitch, Colorado Hugge, Dave Pickett, Dr. Puntgusher Esquire, Eden Senta, Edwin Sons, Ember, Fran Rogers, Harper Atkins, Intonian, Joy Content, Kane Kisaragi, Klaus Morals, Madeline Machado, Matthias Graman, Meowmix64, Mary Mello, Mr. Tellius, Mosling, Naib Baishin, Nishved, Paperlanti, Raider of the Stars, Sarah Bloomer, Synchronize, TB Skyen, Vox, Yami Shaggy, Abigail Nail, Ada Avery, Ali, Anna Day, Andreas, Anonymous, Aria Soria, Autumn Muse, Bad Wolfos, BK Flash, Blues Piranha, Bosch Frivarg, Celeste, Charles Goldhaber, Chloe, Chloe Strange, Chris Marshall, LED Mox, Elliot Diebold, Emmy Murphy, Ephemeral Mist, Ferris Feline, Floofquist, Friend of Dracula, Furn, Henrik, Hope, Indigo Trance, Infernal Ramblings, Yea I or Not, Yeon John, J Mission, Jelly God, Jen, Kadath, Catherine Jibes, Lily Swarslander, El Tantivi, Marika, Maddie Madkid, Mara B, Michael Lee, Miles Seawind, Minched Fish, Mitch Haley, Passion Tentacle, Quasar Nebula, Saxon, Shonal McDool, Seth X Odyssey, Shogun, Sean Wolfbark, Silkmoth, Sealy Rookie, Skyhoppers, Sleepy, Sleepy Slug, Soyborn, Surashu, Talia Parkinson, That Queer Birdman, Tiny Sam, Ouija, and Wooftree. And newcomers this time are One Splee 16, Aurora 42, Daniel Thistlethwaite, Emily, Evan Cole, Main Memory, Mark Mahon, Sin Adralia, and Wompy Womperson.
That's it for today. Always wear a seatbelt and look both ways before crossing the street. And remember guys, don't drive your Ferrari Testarossa on your girlfriend's tits without asking first. Consent is really important.